G'day. This is a short analysis and discussion of Chapter 10 of Kate Constable's Crow Country. Now this chapter takes place almost directly after the previous one, where both Sadie and Lockie return from their little excursion out to the stones. And we can see here that it's almost as if they weren't even missed. They just sort of mix back into the events and what's going on as if nothing had really happened, nothing was really different. But for Sadie, I think she's learnt a few things about herself, or is about to learn a few things about herself at this point. And what we've got here, and if we have a look at this quote, Sadie turned away to hide a sudden smile. Lockie would be at the pub. Maybe tonight they'd play that game of pool. Maybe he'd call out, "Hey, Sadie," for everyone to hear. Maybe he'd throw his arm around her shoulder and draw her inside the charmed circle in the pool annex. She'd become one of the gang. After this afternoon, anything seemed possible. Now, reading that quotation, you can see how different she is in terms of wanting relationships, wanting friendships, and wanting to feel like she belongs in this place. Where in the previous chapters, she's worked very hard to fight against that and to try to be alone and isolated and to not enjoy her time in Bort. So this reflects a very different view for her character, and it's very sort of, I don't know, it's very un-Sadie-like sort of behaviour where she's almost trying to wish herself into favour with someone like Lockie here. Okay. Unfortunately, the reality of what happens when she goes to the pub is quite different. As they're talking about the possibility of going to the pub, we've got this dialogue here that's quite notable. David hesitated. "If you want to," he glanced at Walter and Sadie. "Would you guys rather stay here?" Ellie punched his arm. "Of course I'll come. You're trying to get me on my own. Is that your cunning plan?" Walter muttered. "I don't care." "I want to come," said Sadie, glaring. David's shoulders twitched inside his leather jacket in the slightest of shrugs. "Okay." Now, just from this dialogue, you can see that there's different motivations, different reasons, and sort of different feelings about this possibility. David's the most hesitant one, almost as if he's aware of what's about to unfold, whereas people like Sadie and Ellie in particular are a little bit more unaware, or perhaps a bit naive to the events that are about to follow. But in spite of all of that, David still goes along with it. And then we've got this reflection from Ellie here. "I thought it would take ages to fit in," Ellie was saying. "But everyone's been so friendly. Because you had family here," David murmured. "Not really strangers. I feel as if we really belong here. You know, like we've come home." Now that is an interesting reflection when you consider the concept of belonging and how long it can take to develop that sense of connection with the place that you live in. And Ellie's already starting to feel something like that. But even in the next line, Sadie disagrees wholeheartedly. She still doesn't have that connection with this town that Ellie's starting to feel. And I think we need this established early on in this chapter so that we can see how different it actually is by the end of this chapter, because there is quite a shift in feeling and behaviour. Now, as they walk into the pub as this group of four, things start to turn. And I'll read this quote to you. "But Sadie realised immediately that something was different. People looked round. They stopped talking. They stared, and their neighbours turned to stare too. Sadie felt as if the whole pub had fallen silent, watching them." Now, instead of people turning, then saying g'day and turning back to their conversations, there was a definite uncomfortable feeling as this group of four have now walked into the pub. And it's simply because of the company that is together here, and it shows the disapproval, if you like, of everyone in the town. So en masse, the whole township is almost judging, particularly Ellie for, or not so much just Ellie, but Ellie and David for trying to pursue the relationship that they are pursuing. And that's quite a shame. If we continue here, we can see Ellie's reaction. Her chin was up, her cheeks were pink, and her eyes were bright. Sadie knew that her mother had noticed the stares and the mutterings. So in spite of the uncomfortable nature of what she's experiencing, she's trying to be brave and to face it, essentially, and to not make a big deal of it. But regardless of their reactions, there is a very uncomfortable feel here. The mood and the tone is vastly different to previous chapters. And as they're talking about their menu options, David laughed. Sausages sound good. He spread his arms across the back of the couch and stuck his boots up on the low table. He didn't care if people muttered and stared. He knew he had as much right to be here as anyone. He looked strong, invincible, like a warrior. And you've got to come back to this idea of using that terminology, using that language to describe someone like David is quite important, because that's the sort of by using that sort of language, we can see him described according to the language befitting his culture. A warrior is someone that we should admire, and admire for their bravery. In this case, it's not bravery in battle or hunting, but bravery in fighting against social injustice and fighting against the racism in modern Australia. So yeah, he is a different form of a warrior, but a warrior nonetheless. And Sadie sees this in him and instantly respects it. Now, as the two younger ones go off and play some pool, we see Sadie making much more of an effort to engage Walter here, and they're talking about playing pool. Do you know how? He shrugged again. Sort of. Sadie explained the rules and took the first shot, but she missed, and the ball ricocheted uselessly off the cushion. Walter hefted his cue awkwardly onto the table, lined up and thrust. The ball shot straight into the pocket. Sadie gaped. Thought you couldn't play. Thought wrong, didn't you? And Walter, with the grin, lined up his next shot. Now, we haven't really heard much from Walter. He's a very sort of quiet and reserved fellow. And here we see a very different side to his character. And it shows how reserved he can be, and he chooses when to reveal things about himself and when to engage with others. But look, in this exchange, he has quite the sense of humour. So we're getting a good sense of his characterisation here. And it continues on. Once the other teenagers come in and try and ruin the game, and you can see how forceful their language is. You kids, off. You are finished now. That really demanding sort of tone that they're using. And Walter's reaction is an interesting one. Walter didn't let go. He raised his head and stared into Lockie's eyes. You should watch out, mate, he said in a low voice. Bad things happen to people who piss me off. Now, Walter isn't in any way, shape or form the sort of character who should be judged in the way that he has been by this town, but he's certainly going to use that to his advantage. So all the rumours and things that they've been saying about Walter that he is very aware of, he's taking advantage of the things that they're saying about him to try and use that to threaten Lockie, and it works. So only through, his quick thinking, his wit and his intelligence is he able to overcome this conflict that he's now facing with this group of other individuals. And of course this tension is racially based. They focus here on Walter. They do not focus necessarily on Sadie. So it's because he's an Aboriginal boy that he's targeted in this instance. And then we go on. There's a little bit more of an exchange, and Sadie follows him out of the annex. She was almost crying with rage. "Don't you just want to hit them?" Walter responds. Walter shrugged. "Nah, there's better ways." So we see a really mature reaction to these events. He could certainly feel the same way that Sadie does and want to lash out and fight and try and stand up against the racism that he's just experienced. But he doesn't. He wants to do it in the way that's actually constructive. He wants to do it in a way that's actually going to be worthwhile, not to just perpetuate the stereotypes of that are perhaps inflicted on other Aboriginal people. So it's a great way to show how different people can react to the same circumstance, and how our expectations of those reactions are often challenged by people as well. And it takes the better person, and in this case Walter, to make the right decision. Right, for the next analysis we'll look at chapter 11. I hope that helped you a little bit with chapter 10 and you're enjoying the text as much as we are. This has been an ETV production brought to you by Prendeville Catholic College.